Welcome to Spooky History. In today's episode, we're meeting the ghost writers who were actually ghosts. According to the Cambridge Online Dictionary, a ghost writer is a noun. But it also means someone who writes a book or article, etc., for another person to publish under his or her name. Make your mind up, Cambridge Online Dictionary. It can't be two things, because what it should really mean is a ghost that is creative with a pen and an alphabet, a common enough situation that one would expect it to have its own word, without competition from a different occupation that doesn't involve spirits at all. You've never met writers, have you? There's a lot of spirits there. Next, you'll tell me that ghosting and murdering aren't the same thing. But yes, despite the lack of acknowledgement in dictionaries written by the living, spiritual entities are keen authors. Shelves could be filled with their output, entire libraries even, some of them dating back to before books even existed in our modern understanding. Perhaps the first and most famous use of unworldly beings to justify creativity is the Muses themselves, the 9 goddesses who embody the arts, even though the Greeks themselves seem to have been perfectly happy to leave the origins of their myths nebulous, or in the case of Homer and the Iliad, ascribe them to human hands which may or may not have ever existed. There is an old writing adage that says, write what you know, so it should come as no surprise that most books written by spirits are religious in nature, because if they don't know what's really going on up there, or down there, who does? One book that has to be mentioned is, of course, the one that has reportedly distributed the most copies in the history of mankind, the Bible. Parts of the Bible, at least according to itself, so self-referential, are directly dictated by beings from beyond, such as the 10 Commandments, those little rules that most of us have broken at least half of. Unless, of course, you've never worked on a Sunday, wanted something somebody else had, been disrespectful to your parents, or used the Lord's name in vain, which I never have, goddammit. Ah, damn it. John 14:26 clarifies that everything in the Bible can be taken, for want of a better word, as gospel, being either directly dictated divinely or directly inspired and remembered divinely. Of course, what inspired these texts originally is a matter of belief, but it is unhelpful to behave as if Solomon or Jesus spoke English. At the very least, it may help us better understand the widely diverging religions that have sprung up around what is supposedly the same God, or variations thereof, even when they have similar traditions regarding the source of their cultures. These include the Quran, said to have been transcribed by Muhammad with the help of the Archangel Gabriel, and much later the Book of Mormon, said to have been translated by Joseph Smith from golden tablets delivered to him by an angel, who presumably also hummed all the songs from the musical as well. Fun fact, I've actually been to the place where Joseph Smith found the tablets. It's a lovely little town, and Winston Churchill's grandparents got married there. I bought a mini pillow. With these texts being foundational to many people around the world, it isn't surprising that many subsequent religions or spiritual texts have also claimed spiritual inspiration, though to less widespread acceptance. The number of these works has greatly increased over the last 2 centuries, partly due to the popularity of a movement began in Hydesville, New York in 1848, in the home of Maggie and Kate Fox. Modern spiritualism resulted in dozens upon dozens, hundreds of works, some of them also apparently channeled by God, the Holy Spirit, or angels, such as 1907's Epistle of Barnabas or Hester Dowden's Gospel of Philip the Deacon. But Hester Dowden was also part of a different tradition, that which ascribed works of acknowledged fiction to the spirits of human beings who were no longer with us, as opposed to higher beings from another plane. Most of these spirits had been famous writers in their previous life, including William Shakespeare. Although as it's past tense, I guess it's did I was Shakespeared. In 1873, a Vermont painter named Thomas Power James apparently channeled Charles Dickens into finally solving his unfinished mystery of Edwin Drood. In 1917, Emily Grant Hutchings and Lola Hayes channeled a novel and several short stories credited to Mark Twain. In 1918, the deceased O. Henry published a new collection of short stories, and in 1923, the long-dead Oscar Wilde had published a book of his posthumous conversations and a new play titled Is It a Forgery? Probably. In 1932, Francisco Candido Chico Xavier produced a 421-page book with 259 poems signed by 56 dead poets, and in 1946 William Shakespeare wrote new sonnets and his autobiography. However, some of the ghost artists of this period were writers who had been less famous during their lifetimes, such as the posthumous Indigenous American poet Weena, who first appeared in 1851. But by far the biggest unknown was Patience Worth, a Puritan from the 1600s who worked through a living writer and during the First World War edited her own magazine, published a best-selling novel, and got a Hollywood film deal. In total, she is apparently responsible for 4 million words worth of articles, poetry, stories, and novels. To put that into context, that's about the same as all 7 Harry Potter books, The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and the Bible combined times 2. Honestly, the story behind these late additions to human writers' bodies of work is a wild one, and not just in terms of word count. It includes dead writers in competition with each other after the mediums involved had a massive falling out, a ghost being sued by their publisher for being in breach of contract, and Shakespeare both confirming and denying the authorship of his own work. But even during this time, spirits were not entirely devoted to fiction. A new version of the life of Jesus portions of the New Testament, the Great Gospel of John, was revealed to Jacob Lorber through interior locution between August 1851 and July 1864, with a follow-up being added to it by Leopold Engel in 1891, which followers of the original were not entirely sure about. Sequels, am I right? There was also a whole new Bible called Osper, published in 1882, and containing new revelations from the ambassadors of the angel hosts of heaven prepared and revealed unto man in the name of Jehovah, with the man in question being an American dentist called John Ballou Newborough. I guess he just wrote the bare necessities. In 1886, the Roman Emperor Julian made a comeback attacking Christianity with his historical revelations of the relation existing between Christianity and paganism since the disintegration of the Roman Empire, recorded by American writer Thomas Cushman Buddington. Dear God, that sounds like an amazing read. In 1896 came A Wanderer in the Spirit Lands, which detailed the miserable journey through the afterlife of a recently deceased Italian man as told to A. Farnese. In 1905, there was the much earlier written A Dweller on Two Planets by Frederick Spencer Oliver. In 1909, Aleister Crowley published Liber al Vel Legis, this book of the law, which was apparently dictated to him by a preternatural being calling himself Aiwas, whom Crowley later referred to as his personal holy guardian angel. In 1912, a medium channeled Ghost Meslom's book, Two Women, in which the male ghost told the entire gender what their duties in society were. Bet that went down well. 4 years later came the 7 Sermons of the Dead, a collection of 7 mystical or Gnostic texts by C.G. Jung ascribed to the early Christian Gnostics, religious teacher Basilides, and a few years after that the Vaimanika Sastra, a Sanskrit text by Pandit Subbaraya Shastri, allegedly psychically delivered to him by the ancient Hindu sage Bharadvaja, which supports the idea of ancient alien astronauts being behind ancient myths. In 1946 and 47, Italian mystic Maria Valtorta transcribed the Book of Azaria, a set of lessons launched by Sunday Masses, apparently based on a series of dictations which Valtorta attributed to her guardian angel Azaria. But by this time, the openly fictional side of spiritual writing had had its day. In 1960, Mark Twain came back from the grave again for a series of conversations with Mildred Swanson entitled God Bless You, Daughter, to little fanfare. By the time a retired 73-year-old bank officer and his middle-aged daughter Vera claimed to have channeled Ian Fleming's new James Bond novel in October 1970, they were able to get a meeting with his brother, but that was about it. And even that, well, that must have been facilitated by familial grief at a death that was less than a decade old at the time. No time to die? Definitely not, especially with deadlines looming. Those two wannabe mediums were even less successful, even though they had allegedly channeled news stories by Arthur Conan Doyle, H.G. Wells, Edgar Wallace, Ruby M. Ayres, W. Somerset Maugham, and George Bernard Shaw, which strangely all read like they had been written by the same person. I wonder why. Subsequently, the paths of creative work and religious texts diverged, at least in the mainstream. Poet James Merrill won the Pulitzer Prize Poetry in 1977 and 2 National Book Awards in 79 and 83 for works dictated from the Ouija board, but he only ever publicly implied that the Ouija board acted more as a magnifier for his own poetic thoughts than as a hotline to the spirit. On the spiritual side, most of the following ones were New Age related, like the Seth materials, edited edited by Jane Roberts, some of the most popular ones including 1976's A Course in Miracles, which was apparently dictated to Helen Schumann by Jesus Christ himself and discussed on the Oprah Winfrey Show in 1992, resulting in more than 2 million volumes sold, and 3 years later, the just published Book 1 of Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, making it onto the New York Times bestsellers list for 137 weeks. But while their star has seemingly faded recently in Europe and the US, spirit writing remains big to this day in Brazil, where spiritists, believers of a doctrine founded on the existence, manifestations and learning of spirits, were the fourth largest religious group in Brazil, comprising of almost 4 million people, according to a 2010 census. Spiritism was founded by Hippolyte Reveil as an offshoot of spiritualism that accommodated the belief in reincarnation. Reveil wrote under the name Allan Kardec, a name revealed to be a past life of his by a spirit calling itself Truth. Kardec's books, along with hundreds more, were hugely popular in Brazil. The translator of these 450 total books, the Francisco Xavier, was honoured with a stamp on April 2, 2010 for the 100th anniversary of his birthday and was voted Best Brazilian in an award run by Brazilian broadcaster SBT in 2012. Though this may have been partly due to his charity work and not the whole ghost book thing. Anonymous human writers may have called dibs on the name of ghost writers, but it seems obvious that a lot of the most successful ones have historically come from the other camp. This episode was inspired by a digital performance for the Edinburgh Horror Festival, The Literary Medium. It is an hour-long show featuring several of the writers mentioned, including full readings of some of their ghostly work. If you're watching this in October 2021, then you can still catch it, link below, and you may recognise the presenter. Ding! I hope you enjoyed that episode of Spooky History. You can support us from just £1 a month at patreon.com/thenoisyghosts. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, comment, hit the bell icon, etc, etc. Thanks for watching and please do have nightmares. Goodbye. But when they do get down to business, what do spirits with no earthly woes have to write about? Do people have cars that are that noisy?
It's a motorcycle, huh?
Why do people have motorcycles? They're noisy. Have a push bike. Have a trike. Penny farthing! Whose past tense was, of course, will I was, shooks. Will I go back? Although as it's now past tense, I guess it's, I don't know, did I was Shakespeared? There was also a whole new Bible called Ospa. Ospa, go back. Ospa. I did try pronouncing this earlier. Ospa. 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 Gonna have a whisper in the spa. In 1912, medium Machiavelli channeled ghost Meslam's book, Two Women, to which the In 1912, medium Mary Machiavelli. Go back. Mary Machiavelli. In 1912, a medium channeled ghost Meslam's book, Two Women.